so fucking hot.
Yeah, well deserved.
And that's, that's my highly academic, judgment on that.
Kick.
Highly fucking hot.
Highly fucking hot. Welcome to Psychocinematic, a podcast where we analyse depictions of mental illness and disability in popular films and TV. I'm your host, Stephanie Fornasia. If you love our podcast and want to give us some support, make sure you're following Psychocinematic Podcast on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. And check out our website, psychocinematicpodcast.com. For access to special bonus content, episodes, early access, stickers, and contribute to our regular fundraisers, join our Patreon. Starting from $3.50 a month, you can be the coolest psychocinematic listener there is. I wish to start this podcast today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we record today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to recognise that we're currently recording on stolen land and that this was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast Clinton McQueen. How are you today, Clinton?
All right, Steph. Great to see you outside of work hours.
Yes. Yeah, so we worked together, we did until I jumped ship briefly from the team in disability inclusion. I'd like to say thank you because this is our 50th podcast episode today. So you are my guest for number 50.
Awesome. It's such a privilege, and I'm very much looking forward to the fun little topic that we've got to discuss today. So I can't wait.
So Clinton, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and what brings you onto the podcast today?
I am a speech pathologist, work with the lovely Stephanie, who I'm doing this podcast with, or used to, until she rudely jumped to another team once I was acting manager. That's fine, no offense.
It was just coincidence.
Yep, sure. So that's where, we've had the pleasure of working for quite a few years. So that's where speech pathologist by professional background. I have a great interest in sort of advocacy and inclusion of all, and that's those with a disability or those from minority groups. I identify as cis male, homosexual, proud of it. And the last part would be that I do identify as having a disability. However, I'm a little bit protective of just my own narrative, just because more of my story was sort of taken out of my hands. So that's where it's a bit of reclaiming self. So I'm happy and more than happy to talk about my disability, however, only in context. And I suppose another preamble as part of my introduction would be just really acknowledging that just my way of being, sarcasm would be regarded as my second language. So that's where I really do acknowledge this and really want to state that this does run a risk for me and my reputation, just in terms of it could be misinterpreted, some things that I say, and you can't actually really pick up when the sarcasm is there or not. I would really appreciate that if there is any contention with what's said, don't talk around me, ask me directly. I'm more than happy to sort of further any clarification. And another big preamble would be I never claim to be an expert at anything, and I'm merely here to really support this conversation with you, Steph. I'm not here on a professional basis, more of a personal, and just really wanting to talk about something with a past interest in, and then just really sharing my lived experience of being a part of the LGBTQI plus community, but then really acknowledging that I am not having that lived experience of some of the community members that we are discussing today. So I'm merely bringing some thoughts to words. Sometimes they land, sometimes they're refined, sometimes they're developed, sometimes they're not. No one's perfect. That's okay. I'm merely here just to have this fun discussion with you.
I invited you on because we were sort of talking about Falling for Christmas with Lindsay Lohan, and I was like, well, you can come on the podcast if you want.
Phenomenal movie, everyone, yes. If you haven't seen it. I already watched it twice.
But I asked what you wanted to do or wanted to talk about today, and you picked a very specific piece of media.
Well, yeah, thanks for, putting that full power onto me of choosing this. I picked it because I watched it very recently, and this was one media type that I was obsessed with when I was younger. And at that time, I loved every bit of it. But then I've watched this again, and as we get older and our morals, ethics, everything develops, that's where those eyes completely change. So that's when I watched it again. I was like, this is not quite okay, to say the least.
So it's America's Next Top Model.
All I'm going to say is Australia's was the best, but continue.
It was very good. Cycle 11. Why specifically Cycle 11?
I chose Cycle 11 because I thought it was a really pivotal part of the Next Top Model cycles. Got to get the terms right. Sorry, Tara. It really, to me, and even when I was watching it when I was younger, yep, that was a revelation, but also just really seeing the shift and change in content and the focus as soon as that contestant left, spoiler alert, then that's where the shift came to like really just using the contestants as fodder, like whatever their difficulties were or their differences, that's what was used to really broadcast them. And it was identity first. Like, it doesn't matter that they're a person. It's a matter of what you represent and how we can use that against you or to really create drama or media or, you know, some interest.
Create a storyline out of that aspect, which becomes
100%.
their entire personality. Yeah, I'm really glad that you chose to focus on this because our first podcast episode for the year was on Married at First Sight with Claire Verrall, and I've been doing TikToks and Reels about it, unpacking how harmful it is and all the tropes that are being used, and it portrays psychology as well in counselling. So reality TV has been at the forefront of my brain. I'm regretting making that decision because I'm so sick of Married at First Sight right now. You know, I also, well, not really grew up because I think it started when I just finished high school. You know, it was a very vulnerable time in my life where America's Next Top Model was on, and it was on because we had Foxtel, so it was on all the time.
Oh, rich.
Yes. It was either Foxtel or a dog, so we picked Foxtel.
Oh, wow, choices.
And then we got a dog anyway. But yeah, it very much shaped a lot of young people's vulnerabilities and how they saw themselves, I think, at that time. And it's a very long-standing show, so...
And that's why I sort of chose it because I will openly say that I am one of your biggest fans. And that's where I saw, and I had a little bit of pity because I'm of similar vein that Married at First Sight, has it had its time also. That's where, with that reality TV, really reflecting on reality now versus what was in the past. So that's what brought about me going, oh, what was reality TV about 10, 15 years ago and how's that sort of developed and how's that sort of shifted and changed? So that's another reason with your, sort of focus on Married at First Sight is why I sort of stuck in that reality realm.
So, do we want to talk a little bit about America's Next Top Model? Obviously, it started in 2003. We can at least determine that much. It was hosted by Tyra Banks, and also Rita Ora had a go.
She had one cycle, girl, and she did not do well.
That was the end, the beginning of the end.
That's, I think we can really shift and change the narrative of ANTM and why Rita was involved. That's part of the narrative, but I think let's get a bit of a synopsis just for those, younger kids out there that weren't a part of this with us.
Who's Tyra Banks? So it was 10 to 15 female contestants initially competing in a modelling competition, always including a photo shoot each week and challenges. At the end of each week, a model goes home. It was judged by a panel including common judges were Nigel Barker, Jay Alexander, Janice Dickinson and Twiggy. In cycle 20 to 22, there were males included, and there was also an All-Star season and a British Invasion season. And there's been heaps and heaps of international spin-offs. Australia had a season, which was excellent. Obviously, RuPaul's Drag Race was kind of a parody. Was it a parody? Or
it wasn't really a parody.
Like,
I think it was inspired because that's what Ru's openly stated in... Well, don't ask for this interview, people. But that he was saying that it was a mixture of both Next Top Model versus Project Runway.
Yeah.
And that's how he sort of envisaged that, but sort of just getting the voice out there for drag contestants, but then even Ru himself. That took a iteration of itself of including transgender also. So that's what... Mm-hmm. And then that's where, when you mentioned all those international spin-offs, that's where I was... it's a mixture of combination of feelings in terms of slight embarrassment / pride, because I accumulated 46 cycles of Next Top Model I have seen throughout my life. And that's only watching them
that's
at
a
least
lot of
once.
time.
Correct. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, come on.
Well,
aren't you more intellectual than this? But then I go back to that there are those studies out there saying that those highly intellectual people are attracted to reality TV.
Yes, yeah.
Hence you
Thank
with
you.
Married at First Sight. Duh.
I'm not attracted to it.
I've got to do it
It's a toxic relationship.
to uphold, the psych profession.
Yeah. And do you remember the Australian version where the host read out the wrong girl's name?
Yeah, I do.
Such an iconic moment.
Well, it was iconic, but was it? Because it was so staged.
Oh, you think it was
Oh,
staged?
it was most definitely because they were like clamouring for ratings.
Right.
And this is
See,
like,
I'm still naive, even when
yeah.
I'm, dissecting these things.
That was my and this is a very boring story. I'll just preface it like that. This is the closest that I've come to Next Top Model. I was at a unnamed restaurant in Melbourne, and just from a very negatively viewed chef. So that's what I'll leave that restaurant. And then across on the table next to me was Montana Cox, who won Next Top Model, and she was my favourite. And then I was so overwhelmed and nervous that I couldn't go over and this was
I
literally
can't imagine that about you.
I know, right? And that's what, it's like probably 6-7 years ago. And in my head, I'd created this narrative, and it's a lot more interesting in my head than what it is when I say it out loud. I've told one friend, and he was just like, this is a very boring story. But then that's where I couldn't even ask for a photo. And I was like, that's the closest I've ever come, and I've just missed it.
Aww.
I know, I was pretty disappointed.
That's
pretty
my life
shattered.
story.
I know, right? So, the joys of retrospect.
Well, it finished in cycle 25.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there was a hiatus, just because I think there was a bit of backlash, and that's what sort of prompted the shift and change in contestants to include males, and there was more active inclusion of those with disabilities and just alternative lives.
So let's talk about the models of season 11, and we'll start with who goes home first. So if you haven't
whoa.
watched it...
Steph?
Well, that just makes sense in my head.
Yeah, fair enough.
If you haven't watched it already, I'm sorry about spoilers. Otherwise, I can link you to a link that I will not disclose what it is, but you'll figure it out. So let's start with Sharon. So there was how many Britneys? 4 Britneys?
Way too many, mate.
Too many Britneys.
And then when they're like, on watching said link, because all their names were reverse,
Yeah.
I couldn't be like, Brittany who? Brittany who? What's your name? I can't even remember.
I can't even read it. They changed a few of the Britneys to various names just to make it easier to understand. So Sharon was the first Britney to go home. Thoughts on Sharon?
Look, she was very out there, wasn't she? She
was very excitable.
Well, and I think, was she the one that was just like screaming on the way in?
I think so. She was one of the
Well, a lot of
ones.
them were screaming on the way in, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah, with her screaming when she met Tyra and like ridiculous confidence to really overcompensate, because I was thinking, girl, like in comparison to the others,
it didn't
good
work.
luck. And then I just really appreciated that she had her lucky underwear, and, the speech pathologist in me just appreciated the word slip up. So she said, that is not accessible by me.
That's right.
And I had a little giggle to myself.
That's a very speech pathology giggle. But yeah, she was the one who kept saying, I want this so bad. I am America's Next Top Model.
Yes, that confidence was everything.
Yeah, but it didn't go so far.
No, first one out. Whoopsies, whoopsie poopsie.
Then we have Nikki Clark, who came off at the beginning really confident, really keen to be there. But then the second episode, she was like super awkward, super quiet, didn't handle the criticism and kept interrupting Tyra every time she tried to give her critique. She's like, and Tyra's just like, shut up.
And wasn't that the best, elimination when Tyra's just like, stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
You need to listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
ABC, antecedent behaviour consequence.
Oh, yeah, she flashes at her audition that she's got, chicken breasts.
That was the first, moment that I just reflected on self and went, oh, no, what for? And this show was a product of its time.
Yeah.
This was not the only show to really help shape this social conditioning that we were all victim to from our generation. So that's where, when she was flashing, I was just like, the fact that that's regarded as a positive thing to be doing to really try and broadcast yourself. So like
Yeah, or
leading
stand
with
out.
sex or like
Being
really?
risque.
Yeah.
Nah,
No,
didn't
no,
come
mate.
off well.
Well, and you mentioned her, and I completely forgot about her until you just said it. And I was
Clearly
like,
didn't
oh,
work.
so not very memorable.
And that's often the case with the ones that go home first because they're not around as much. But the next one was Brittany R. She was one that I kind of forgot about, but I think she's actually really beautiful. She was the first African American on the cover of Las Vegas Weekly. Yeah, that's all I can really remember about it.
And I actually, because, I think we're as nerdy as each other here, Steph, that in my notes that I wrote, she is beautiful.
She's gorgeous.
Like, absolutely stunning. So that's where I would agree with you. Do I remember her that much? Not
No.
really.
I guess she didn't have a huge personality, which
You
made
sort
it
of
less
need for the
exciting.
show, because that's where,
Yeah.
like, you need to be...
Well, it's entertainment.
You need to be fodder.
Yeah.
Like, so then you can't just be pretty.
Yeah. Then we have Hannah, Hannah White. So she was the one, she's from Alaska, and she kept saying that we didn't have any electricity, we didn't have any heating. So she was like excited by everything. Tyra chases her like a moose in her first introduction, which is the weirdest thing ever.
Like, really, like... Just watching that is just cringeworthy, but it is just Tyra Banks trying to create TV.
Yes.
And
it was like before memes. Well, I guess memes were kind of a thing then, but it was like now that's
just
a meme.
emerging.
Yeah.
And that's where Hannah is just the naivety is just that's how she was broadcast, so that's how we've interpreted her. But then just the things that were coming out of her mouth, like when she got showed how to do the work, she's like, okay, thanks guys, good movie. And I was just like, ugh. Every part of you is making me like just cringe.
Yeah, like you said, she had a few slightly transphobic, homophobic things said, and she kept referencing that she's from a small town, she's not used to being around people like ISIS. A few of the girls say that. But hopefully she's learnt a little bit since then.
But then, like, I don't know if you actually watched, because I hate these episodes, but the recap one, so it was like episode 7, horrible. Anyway, but there was a cut scene, and it was with Hannah, and she brought what she termed pixie dust.
What?
Did you even watch this? Oh, girl, you know, watch it. So then she was just saying, like, things like, it protects you from bad energy, and her mum gave it to her, and it was like this naive small little girl sort of narrative attached to it. And then in my head I was like, is that Coke? Like honestly, what are you doing?
That was my first thought. Is
yes.
that what you meant?
Is that why it's a pixie dust? Because you see the pixies afterwards?
Snuff. Oh my God.
So I do recommend watching that just because.
Okay. Because, I realised it was a recap. I'm like, I'll skip this one. But yeah, she goes home because she can't walk. And then we have Isis, who is, pretty incredible in the fact that she's the first trans contestant on the show, and a woman of colour. Like, she wows the judges very early on. She's a very good model, but they are constantly saying there's something different about her. There's something unique about her. What is it? So it's very much like we have to remember she's trans all the way through, which is very much of its time. She was also previously on the show as a background model as well.
Well, and she was a background model, and she was actually within a homeless shelter.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So let's just add minority on minority here for her.
Yeah.
So that's where it was really a positive inclusion, I feel. But I think we'll probably delve into that a lot more, where I just think Tyra missed a lot of opportunities to create a better tomorrow. Instead, actually sort of cemented really negative connotations and negative cycles of thinking. So, she did come in from a previous season.
She's very low-key the whole way through. Like, I'm expecting people to not really get me, but I'm just going to be myself.
Yep.
And she just does get a lot of backlash from the other girls.
And quite harshly.
Yeah.
And I suppose like with Hannah, as you've said earlier, she stated, I wouldn't usually hang out with Elena, who identifies as more sexually diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Isis, who's gender diverse, because she's identifying as transgender. And sort of on that label of transgender, I really want to note that even Isis in the cycle refers to herself as transsexual.
True.
That sort of that labeling and that real lower knowledge base was a product of the time, and really think of the amazing progress we've made in terms of being more respectfully validating and acknowledging of difference now. We've come full steam ahead, like in terms of
Mm.
our own knowledge with open discussion now of ableism, xenophobia, really understanding that there is a big difference between sexuality, sex, and gender. And even with ISIS, we would now more respectfully acknowledge to how she identifies as transgender. She was wanting to go through gender affirmation and not gender reassignment, as she states in the cycle. Just
Yeah.
that slight shift in language and
Mm.
that narrative, which is just a little bit more respectful and a little bit more um, sort of all encompassing and acknowledging the full gamut.
So that's where even those slight shifts in language really help shape a more respectful and inclusive
Yeah.
society. And that's what was sort of really missing. And that's where like direct quotes of just obviously Hannah that I've said earlier. But then there was also one more that was worse because even when they were looking at her photos, it was a highly gendered appraisal, like, oh, she's got really manly hands,
Yeah.
and it's just like,
Yeah, the
why do we have to
photographer was
gender
like,
it?
I wouldn't have her as a model because of her physique or something like that. Like,
And
she's not model physique.
and like even the girls' reactions, as you were saying earlier, like one said, "Is a role model a transvestite?" I don't think so.
Yeah.
What?
And like one
Yes,
of them
they
calls
can
her a
be.
drag queen as well, which, yes. Hell
Yes.
yes.
If you could transform yourself into 10 years in the future, most definitely yes.
100%.
You're going to be making a lot more money as opposed to you C grade model.
Yes. Also, when she first comes in, I think it's J. Manuel, says she's trying really hard to be a girl or a woman, trying really hard to be a woman. So even not allowing her presence, like that she is a woman, she's not trying to be a woman, she is a woman.
Yep.
We've come a long way since those misconceptions as well.
100%.
It's almost like back then you couldn't just own yourself because it was still so new to be out as a trans person. So you like she could only say I'm transgender because she didn't feel confident enough to say I'm a woman.
Correct.
So I think it's really time to address the pink elephant in the room, as I'm a big advocate of recognising and really acknowledging our privilege and seeing the other side of the coin. So yeah, I identify as being part of that LGBTQI plus community, but even within that minority, I'm in a place of white gay male privilege, like where I'm the least disruptive in terms of, and I use disruptive with quotation marks, to our largely heteronormative world. So I'm a part of the community. However, let's recognise that I do not identify as transgender or a person of colour. So that's not my place really to provide much dialogue or opinion on a minority
Yeah.
within a minority that I'm not a part of, or I don't have that lived experience. And that's why I kept mentioning that I'm in a place of privilege within that LGBTQI plus community, because this privilege of being a white, gay, and cis male almost regards me as the safest, and that's quotation marks around that again, to a society that's being progressively desensitized to the full breadth of the LGBTQI plus community and the greater acknowledgement that we're all valid. I personally wish that this was a lot quicker than how it's going, and not taking these backward steps like the
Huge backward
US's
steps.
the US's recent drag ban, and we're going one step forward and then almost 14 steps back. So that's where I wish the whole community really was in this similar privilege of really understanding that privilege doesn't exist and we've all got equal acknowledgement and equal validity within this world.
I think she's iconic and amazing that she went through the show with so much thrown at her, so much misunderstanding in the room. It would have been hard.
The only concern that I had, and I thought it was really a positive thing that it was done, but it was almost like she was coerced into doing it for TV, was the hormone injections. I think
yeah.
that was a really pivotal thing, and that could have been really capitalized on. But if she didn't feel safe to do it, you shouldn't force her to do it in front of
No.
camera or get a friend when she's just wanting to do it by herself, or you don't know what stage of acceptance or how she is as a person.
It's a very vulnerable thing,
100%.
very personal thing to share. Like you don't typically watch a diabetic shoot themselves up with insulin on screen, so why should she do that? But you're right. I think it was almost a very important moment to share. This is what it's actually like for someone who's trans and
Well,
going
and
through
'cause
hormone therapy.
we're normalizing it. Like,
Yeah.
that's what everyone is normal. Like, we're all we're on this spectrum, and there's this variation and difference within this spectrum, but we're all human, we're all good people. So that's where it just helps normalize and get a better understanding or insight into that, as opposed to being this pie in the sky foreign concept that we
Yeah.
can't bring to life. This is really bringing that story and that insight into that person's being.
And I think it was relatable because she didn't like the experience and she had a friend who she trusted, well, that was the narrative anyway, help her with the injection. And so it was a nice moment between the two girls.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, she was made to show that on camera. And
Yeah.
I think she picked, was at the time, Annalise, she's now identifies as Leo, to give her that injection. So... And then we have Clark Gilmer.
It's just like, well, at that time, like my version, and I will openly state this because I think I'm at a very evolved form, that I'm an iteration of self in terms of what I would regard as attractive and sexually attractive. And, you know, I'm attracted to males, but I still find women quite attractive and even sexually attractive with some. So that's where I look at her and she's very mainstream and very blonde, slightly
American
tanned,
girl.
American girl. And I just don't think it was really upholding what I viewed as attractive at that time. But then she was just really a product of the OC. That's what she just looked like. She could have been an extra on that. And I was just like,
Yeah.
what for? And then just her reactions to one of my favourites, Elena. Didn't get Elena's love of her.
Yeah,
And
she
thought
had a
she was
crush
in
on
some...
her.
Like,
But she says she's attracted to mean girls.
and like,
So
she got
picked
like...
a mean girl to be attracted to.
Correct. And this is where she's a product of her own, like, bad thinking or, like, alternative thinking, not bad. Because that's where when she somehow, when they're in that spa and she's coerced, Elena's coerced. And then Elena's like, oh, my God, I saw fireworks. And I was like, mate, you have such low expectations because that was the most awkward kiss I've ever seen. And her, like, radiance afterwards with, like, the little side, like, interview, I was like, this is odd. This is very odd. Elena, if this is
Rescue
bringing...
her.
Yes, rescue this very attractive individual, which we'll discuss Elena once she comes up.
Like, just generally, Clark, she's like, I'm competitive. She tells McKee that she says, oh, her shoot was the worst. And she ends up winning the challenge, I'm pretty sure. So she thought a lot of herself. She's also quite transphobic towards ISIS as well.
100%.
Yeah. Lauren Brie Harding, which you've said is one of your favourites, and I don't get it. I'm sorry.
Absolutely adore.
What
like,
is it about her?
personality-wise, that she's not that interesting.
Yeah,
she's a little bit
boring.
meh. But photo-wise, that is a
Yeah.
good model. She
did
is
do a good photo.
beautiful. And it's got, I will say, Cycle 11, this is probably why I chose it also, one of my favourite challenges when they had to just do, thanks Tara, smizing, but in the pool.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I will openly state that I have recreated Lauren's pose.
Have you?
Yeah. The only person that has seen that has been my bestie, Amaki.
Now can it be everyone on Instagram?
Hell no.
Just me?
So it is, probably not one of my finest modelling shoots that I've done, but that photo is everything.
Yeah.
And just some of her photos, especially like even when they were in the hot air balloon, like her photo, oh.
Yeah, she did a good photo there. I think I tend to be I'm very much into boys. I'm straight, sadly.
You're very much into boys.
Very much into boys.
So am I, girl.
But in terms of what I'm most attracted to on this show, I think I'm very much driven by the personality. Like, I'm a little bit demisexual in that way. So I don't know if that really relates in this because it's people on TV.
Very binary construct there that you're just saying you've got to have a good personality for Steph to like you.
Well, it's true. I can't help it.
I'm going to take that as a compliment that I'm on this podcast. Thank you, world. Thank you, Mum and Dad.
I think that's a good photo, but I'm like, because it's so boring to me. I'm sorry.
That was honestly, I've even put in my notes of saying that was one of the worst eliminations because the person that stayed should have left probably the third or fourth time.
Which was that
Sheena.
one? Oh, yeah.
Which
Sheena.
you loved because...
Did I?
I reckon you would.
She was.
I think
See,
she
she wasn't a
but
particularly
she had
nice
more,
person
but she had
either.
personality, which I think you would attach to more,
Yeah, she definitely had more
even
personality.
if it's a negative personality for you.
Well, let's move on to Jocelyn Pennywell. She auditioned 30 times, even though there was like.
And that would be me, girl.
11,
I would be given, I would be going worldwide. I'd be auditioning for the other ones if I was like a 17-year-old girl. I am not. But if I was, I would be doing the same thing. And all I'm going to say on this is with Jocelyn, and this is not being adhering to stereotypes or what have you, but were you not getting Heidi and Closet vibes from Jocelyn?
Yes,
Like,
definitely.
and it's not just because they're a person of colour, but also just like
Just her personality.
very southern
Yeah.
and very lovely demeanoured and really grateful and thankful.
Really vibed and really riffed off the other judges really well.
Correct.
Which is a very hiding closet.
Correct.
Situation.
So that's what, every time I saw Jocelyn, I was just like, wrong show, girl.
Now re-auditioned for RuPaul's Drag Race.
Correct.
Then Sheena went home. Sheena Sake.
Let's give this girl some airtime.
Okay. So you weren't a fan of Sheena.
I was not. I thought she was beautiful, like
She's
stunning.
Very, very good looking.
Personality, yep, some elements I liked, but then photo-wise, she was just horrible.
Yeah, she wasn't that great.
So that's what I look at the models and just go, nah, you shouldn't be on this show because you can't even do your job.
Yeah.
So Sheena was a bit like that, but I just loved there was like, Sheena, like Inky Slinky and just like running down that runway. But then also when Sheena was called out for being too hoochie,
Yeah.
which I was just like, hundy. I would say she is the definition of that within what she was doing and how she saw herself. Like she just defined femininity as high sexuality and just how she carried herself and nothing. And I have in my notes, this is the only part that is absolutely capitalized throughout because it was one of my favorite moments when they had to model these horrible, ugly leather bags, which was very, very circa The Simple Life, Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie vibes.
Definitely that of their time.
That's what. And one girl was like, "Oh, these are beautiful bags." I was like, "Where? Where are they beautiful?"
I don't want those bags as a gift.
But then Sheena grabs this bag. Stop laughing, Clinton. But she's grabbed this bag and she's just put it smack bang in front of her vagina. And it looks like she's giving birth to the bag. And I was just like, Sheena, you've just been told you look so hoochie. And she's just spread her legs like she's giving birth to this horrible, ugly leather bag. Like, what the it's just everything. Like, I was literally by myself. You know how you catch yourself? I was cackling. I was having a few little giggles to myself because I was just like, mate, you've got half a brain. Like, how are you in your head justifying this going, God, I look hot right now. I'm going to win this challenge. I am America's next top model by giving birth to this big leather bag.
Yeah, she was interesting. What did you think about when she walks? They ask if her boobs are fake, which is also a very personal question.
But at this rate on this show, mate, I think there's no holds barred.
We're not expecting anything else. And she's like, no, they're real. And then she walks up later and says, I just want to get something off my chest.
Literally.
They aren't real.
Literally.
Like, what did you think of that situation?
I thought that's okay. Like, I even introduced myself. Like, and I think that's okay. If you've got your own censored way of wanting to communicate with the world, I think that's okay. And it's up to her boundaries, and I think that's okay. And it was really reassuring, and I would second Tyra when she said, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, she acknowledged, feeling privileged and understanding that now we're in a safe space, and it was a reflection of Sheena more so for her to tell the whole truth of who she is as a person. So I thought it was good.
And I think that's one of the redeeming qualities of Sheena is that she was like, no, fuck it, I'll own it. They aren't real, and I'm proud of that. But actually, she did say it was a mistake when she was younger. But
then even Sheena does say one part within there, and I can't remember word for word what the quote is, but she goes, you are more than your culture, which in that one phrase really had me thinking, and this is where I went way too meta on this, going, are you? Or is that a part of you.
I
So,
guess
yeah, you are more than your culture, but it is still really ingrained within you. So it could be taken two ways. It could be a positive or it could be a negative by saying that, because this is where it was coming about from the negative reactions to Marjorie and Elena's different way or demeanours in
Yes.
regards to receiving feedback and basically eating themselves alive. But we'll get to poor Margie. She was just eating herself alive, that
Oh my
girl, wasn't
God.
she?
I feel her. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it depends on everyone's own personal experience of culture too, saying this as a cis white female in Australia. But like Sheena really embraced that even though she was a woman of colour, she was an Asian woman, kept being compared to Kimura, and there can only be one Kimura, she sort of saw herself as more of that American girl, and she didn't really have the attributes, like she didn't embrace her culture quite as much as maybe some of the other contestants did. But that's her choice, and everyone has their own choice of how much they want to ascribe to their culture.
But I think also Sheena was a product of that time. Like, I think we weren't really getting a microphone and celebrating difference at that point.
No.
So then in the early 2000s, and we're all product of this, and that's why I say that sort of social shaping at that time, that the 2000s were a time of who could fit the stereotype best.
And
Don't go
skinny
out.
jeans.
Yeah. No. Weren't those flares? in?
Yes,
And
yes, I
then
had
girls
one of
wearing
those.
those belts.
Yes, those
Like,
belts are
and then-
statement belts.
Yes.
Yes.
But then that's where it was who could adhere to the trends best. Don't be too different, be the same.
Yeah.
So that's where this is a product of not wanting to appear too different. So that's how I interpreted her, not wanting to lead with culture, not wanting to lead with that, because she was just saying, I'm an all-American girl. She's trying to adhere to, at that time, what was deemed
Yeah.
attractive.
Yeah, so that was my thought too. Is this what she thinks people want to see
Correct.
because of the society she's in, or is this genuinely how she feels?
100%. And that's why I really respected when she did come back and say, no, my boobs are fake.
Yeah.
Like, respect. Like,
Yeah.
she's being real. Because that's where I was also interpreting her presentation on the show as, are we even getting Sheena? Like, and if Sheena did this show now, I think it would be like, she would be
A completely
balls to the
different
wall.
person.
Like,
Yeah.
she would be absolutely mayhem, and in a good way.
Yeah, I think she definitely made herself to be this like big, confident sort of person, but whether that was really her, that's a good point.
And I'm glad we're on Sheena still, because we did not have any Asian American winners.
No.
The only Asian winners winners who were of Asian descent were from Asia's Next Top Model, coincidentally. But even if you watched, because I have watched also some Asia's Next Top Model, which they get a whole continent.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
fair
a
enough.
lot of applicants.
It is actually. But then the ones that went really well on that, and this was a product of the times also, were those that were the most highly westernized. So if you had
Yeah.
white eyes, if you had really pale skin, it was odd and just
Yeah.
off, and I couldn't even watch it then, let alone now. I wouldn't even contemplate it.
How long ago was it? Like,
It was at the time.
Same
So
time.
at the time, circa Britain's, Australia's, all the other Next Top Models, it lasted a little bit longer than the others as well. But if we fast pace that forward to the RuPaul's Drag Race, the makeup artist, which we have not even
Oh, yes.
mentioned
Oh my
on
gosh.
Next Top Model, who is Sutan, who is Raja.
Raja, yes.
So then Raja is the only Asian American winner. So
amazing.
that's
yeah.
at least one positive that's come out of this, that Next Top Model has created the only inclusive of all cultures and ethnicities Asian American winner. And that's really, 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 really reassuring.
Yeah. Well, top 5. So we've got
Ayo.
Elena Ivanova. I really loved her, and I know you did too. So
Just everything.
She's
like
beautiful.
her face is
just
beautiful.
gorgeous.
And I was like, you are a beautiful, beautiful individual. And I do not love what they've done with your hair, but you are still
They
beautiful.
did her dirty with that hair.
But
oh
she was still
my God.
beautiful.
She was.
And when
She
they did
rocked
that,
it.
she did the red hair in alternative forms,
Yeah.
much better.
Much better.
Beautiful.
Like when she cried when they did her makeover, I was like, I'm crying with you.
100%.
Your hair looks fine without
And like
this.
they were paying her out, and when they had to get into the bloody Kermit suits or those big green
Oh, yeah.
leather
Oh, I
pleather
hated
things, it was
those.
disgusting. And she was claustrophobic. I was like, yeah, Yeah.
100%.
Your full body, including face, is covered and you are trapped in this.
Yeah.
This is a normal human reaction.
Response. Yeah. And that's what Elena was very socially conscious. She's vegan. She's very open about her sexuality. She, I don't think she explicitly states that she's like pansexual, but it sounds like she says she's sexually diverse. She just likes the person.
Correct. And that's where and she was so inclusive that it did seem more pansexual. And that's what, because I know that even you noted bisexual, and I was like, oh, it's more pansexual the way that she sort of broadcasts how she identifies. And that's where she said, I'm attracted to the person, not so much the machinery. And that's where it could be interpreted as pansexual or, genderqueer or bisexual.
Yeah. But, like she doesn't like hide any part of herself, and she's kind of deadpan at the times, like,
which I loved.
I know, same. But a lot of people give her shit for not being like positive all the time. But like, wouldn't you rather her be genuine?
Correct.
So that really, it bothered me that she got so much flack from everyone else. And when I was reading articles, they sort of said, oh, she was the villain of the show, and I'm like, what?
Well, again, the editing.
Yes.
That's how.
What they tried,
that's how. Because I thought she was actually really socially forward-moving. And she was really open, and she would openly be transparent and share how she identified and felt. And I really respected her because even when she was challenged, she would put her foot down and she would justify appropriately. She wouldn't get too angry, but she would still put across her message in a really appropriate, respectful way. And, you know, I'm just thinking in terms of the veganism and sort of her response to, and it was in that episode that you did not watch, where she went on about veganism and eating animals, and they were in a limo and then they had this big fight, and it was just really awkward to watch, but she handled it quite well.
Man, I missed some drama.
Yeah.
But I do recall, like, at the beginning when they were like, oh, what about the meat challenge we did last year? Would you be able to do that? Just like, no. It's like, yeah, stick with your values and morals.
I love a good steak, but I would not want to do that.
No, it's disgusting.
Ew. She was of that time where she was same but different, and appropriate different, not too much for that time, whereas now we highly celebrate difference. But in the 2000s, it was like, oh, don't disrupt the cart too much.
Yeah, too disruptive.
Elena, also, if you have researched what she's done after Next Top Model, she is a businesswoman, and she has made an absolute fortune, and she looks equally as beautiful now, and I highly recommend getting on her Instagram.
Oh, I will.
Beautiful still.
Amazing.
Well, I don't think she'd lose the beauty.
I'm glad she's a businesswoman because
she's got like 3 or 4 businesses.
Oh, fantastic.
And she's an absolute like boss bish.
Because when you look at like what they've all done afterwards, not many of them have become models like for very long after the show. From this cycle anyway.
Oh, from this cycle, yeah, probably. I agree with that. But I respectfully challenge and say that a lot have made decent money, probably only the 1 year or so afterwards. And it's those that have been signed by elite model management or, you know, who was ever sponsoring that cycle. Those are the ones that got a lot of work.
Next is Marjorie Conrad, who is... You're not a fan of Marjorie?
I liked her. I think she's really, really pretty.
And she's French. But she's French.
That was the most bogan Australian thing.
She's French.
I don't know if you know this, but she's French. She's from France.
It came up in like every episode that she's French.
Because so you know.
I saw myself most in her because she was the anxious girl.
Because you're as beautiful.
Well, yes, I am, but also very different body type. But just she was so underconfident all the time, but she would churn out good photos and good catwalks, but was
reminiscent of Stephanie Fornasia. Oh, I just like amalgamated your own name. Stephanasia.
Ooh, why have I never done that before?
How does your catwalk name go?
I mean, I'm just walking down the runway every day.
Yeah. Well, put on that good tune and off we go.
But yeah, like she couldn't keep it together, and it kind of ended up her downfall in the end, I think.
I don't know. Like, I think I looked at Marjorie, pretty, but I think she was quintessentially very European French, as you like to term it. French. She French. So then, I don't know why I just went American on that. So then that's where I just looked at contestants from other cycles with very similar bone structure, short hair. They're more beautiful in my eyes, contestants. And I think this is a very appropriate time to be mentioning that I am still suffering from severe PTSD. Well, that is actually one of my diagnoses. But Elise Sewell from Cycle 1, back in 2003, she came second. She could have come first. I'm sorry. She was beautiful, absolutely stunning. Also made money afterwards. But if you research, that's where I think Marjorie just fit that sort of short hair, thin, tall, frail, quintessentially beautiful but slightly different.
Yeah. And the way she could contort her body, I think, she was kind of lanky. Like it sort of worked for her favour.
Would they term it the hunchback?
The hunchback, yes. Oh. Well, as someone with scoliosis, so I am still a bit of a hunchback at times. I identified really well with that. So now that you're standing up straight, I'm doing that too.
Well, it's only because you mentioned it, and all I've got in my head now is Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion.
That's why it was one of my favourite movies. Because I was
Don't call her back brace girl.
Hi, back brace girl. That was me.
Cute.
She definitely shouldn't have won. She was right to have gotten her when she did, I think. But
I'm glad she didn't win because
I felt represented a little bit by someone like Marjorie.
I didn't want her to win because I just think once Isis left, I think that was the main storyline.
Yeah.
So as soon as she left, that's where Marjorie overtook this and let's just, use her generalised anxiety disorder or manic. There's elements here that you're the psychologist, not me, mate.
It could be ADHD maybe or something going on.
Well, and even in one of the photo shoots with Tyra towards the end where they had to do the natural and the makeup shoot with Tyra, and she was almost like doing this self-regulation, sort of jumping up and down and sensory seeking to like calm herself down.
Yeah.
She was just going into a full spin. And I just looked at Marjorie and I'm like, stunning, but you were eating yourself alive, like almost literally.
She was.
You're just watching it.
Her brain just like going at a million miles an hour with like all of those unhelpful thoughts or destructive thoughts or whatever, just because, and that did her in, I think.
In the words of RuPaul, in a saboteur.
So, Leo Tipton, who is formerly known as Annalie, and this is something I didn't realise.
This is massive. Like, I was really taken aback when you just shared this with me because even I wasn't aware of this.
So Leo came out as non-binary and queer, like I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. They're also a famous actor. They've been in quite a few films. Like I think the only one I've seen is Crazy Stupid Love, which I thought they were pretty good in. Have you seen that?
No, I have not seen that, but I have seen Leo in what was it? I think it was called Friend of a Family, which was a great true crime inspired sort of series. It was brilliant. Like Leo's acting phenomenal. And then I just really, after you revealed just that transition that Leo sort of made, I researched a little bit more once you sort of communicated that to me, and I just really valued their interviews that I researched once you communicated Leo's identity following Next Top Model, where they communicated in those interviews really sort of lived experience where they openly discussed how they identify now as non-binary and queer and the sort of backlash that they received. So, and on that backlash, it was due to them marrying a cis male. And that's where they got a lot of backlash saying, well, you're queer, but you've married a cis male.
Well, which is total bullshit.
Yeah. So that's why when they had to try and justify themselves as to why they still identify as how they identify, that's where I just feel we live in this really very binary world that, even though we want to be more inclusive or woke, and woke in itself is a binary product, where like if you're woke, you've reached your maximum potential and you're a great human being, so you can stop. You can
don't have to learn anymore.
No, you've learn your way to be inclusive. You can stop now. There's
you've
no
done enough.
end point. There is no end point to that.
No.
So yeah, that's where I was really surprised when you shared Leo's transition, and I was surprised that with a lot of what I read and those interviews afterwards, because I felt really in that cycle she presented as really hyper feminine, both
Yeah.
style and her voice, how they regarded themselves within that cycle, even like how she was photographing as highly
Yeah,
feminized.
and I wonder if that was Leo compensating for that, like that feeling that they had to overextend the femininity to fit in. And
Yeah,
you've
like.
got a quote there.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think there was just the one part, and it was such a small little part of one episode, but I really valued it when Annalie, or now Leo, was trying to comfort Marge, good old Marjorie,
Margie.
and Leo said, "It's acting. It's all a bit of acting."
Well, they're a good actor.
Well, no, and that's where that was acting because they were portraying this real
Yeah.
binary product of being highly feminized. So Leo was acting as, the definition of what was regarded as beautiful at that time. So I just really loved that
Yeah.
really simple sentence, just really passing that on to Marge. And when
Mm.
that, in all honesty, it's acting, it's all a bit of acting. And
Yeah.
that's what
It's
she
masking, really.
and that's what they were doing throughout that whole cycle and throughout life at that time, for Leo. And sort of it came across in those interviews, when discussing a friend of the family, they said openly that it was all like their past life. And that's how it sort of came across in those interviews when they were discussing a friend of the family, where Leo openly stated that before the transition, it felt like she was just wearing a mask. And I felt that was really revealing, and it sort of goes back to that saying that I don't think we all have that same lived experience. So, with her being able to do that, think loud, and really sharing that, it let us really value the difference and getting greater insight into the lives that we haven't lived. Which I was really grateful for Leo to be able to be so transparent and open and really talk through it. Do that think aloud just
Mm.
so we could better understand them and their being. And yeah, I just really, really appreciated
And
that.
I think it was interesting given that, like, they became quite close to ISIS, it seems, and there was that representation of someone who was queer and trans. And that could have been a really good opportunity for Leo to connect more with that side of them. And, in 2008, like, clearly that's not what happened. It was much later in Leo's life that they chose to come out. And I wonder if the way ISIS was treated on the show kept Leo in the closet, I guess, or even if that had any impact on Leo at
Good
all.
point, because I just don't think it could have always been a negative effect. Also, it could have had a really positive effect. A bit of Leo questioning themselves. And that's what I would look at and go, that's them openly stating it's acting, it's all a bit of acting. So maybe they actually made the smarter move, because if they did have their
Mm,
revelation mid show, just imagine the editing. It would just
oh,
ruin you as an
100%.
individual and human if you're, finding yourself or questioning yourself a bit too much. Like that editing that's just not appropriate. They've actually made the smart move to really enact the show, like Next Top Model, as they did. They sort of did it on their own terms at that time. Clearly a big advocate of really being in charge of your own narrative, and that's where I think they've sort of had no real need to reclaim themselves, because they've been able to claim their narrative from the start, and that's a big, big thing. They're in control of that.
Yeah, it seems like Leo used the show for how it benefited them and whether or not that contributed to their acting success. I think there was an interview where Leo was like, I'm not even sure if it was really Next Top Model that helped, but they've gone on their journey and they've come to this place. So whether that helped or not.
Yeah, like this really helped with Leo's iteration of self and a more truer form of themselves, and fully being able to express that. And it's really, really admirable, and something that I feel Next Up Models should have been broadcasting or showcasing a lot more, of really celebrating that difference and encouraging more those
Or
individuals fully
diversity.
expressing themselves.
Yeah. It's also very interesting when Leo first turns up that they share that they almost got trafficked.
Right? Like, thank you. I forgot about this. Thanks for triggering that memory, because I almost forgot that was in the first episode, and I'm sorry. But you would think Tyra Banks, of all people, would be like, we need to stay on this topic for a bit longer.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but
there's fodder.
well, right, and they're on a flight to the Arab Emirate nations. Wow, to like meet their arranged marriage. Like,
Yeah,
imagine
they
how
could have
many.
been not even on the show.
Right, 100%. Like that was one shock and revelation, and I really underestimated Leah because with that narrative behind them, they didn't really even get much sort of airtime on that really massive, massive piece, and was just sort of left to its own devices.
Yeah, and I wonder if the editing wanted to see Leah as a bit naive and a bit of a slow burn. Like they didn't want to give them too much airtime first up because and I don't think that Leo was naive, but I think just being like, oh, I was going to be a model and this guy said I was a good model and so I went with him. And like they came across as like, oh, I'm not really in touch with what's going on or in the world. But I actually think Leo is quite smart.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were a product of the time, as I've said, hyper femininity, really softly spoken and passive, because at that time that was regarded as feminine and it fit that label. So again, really binary product, very binary product, and they fit it very well. So whereas the world we live in now, that's not just femininity. Femininity takes many forms, many genders.
Samantha Potter.
Look, I know that you did not like Sam.
I came round to her though. Like, I think she's a
Yes.
genuinely lovely person.
She is just really naive. She's almost like Hannah.
She was very naive.
Hannah, but a little bit more developed and a little bit more articulate.
Yeah.
Debatable. But
Like, she was a little bit mean girly, but she didn't really...
it came from a place of not knowing.
Not knowing. She didn't seem to be actively like, I don't like you.
Correct. It wasn't a planned attack.
No.
In terms of it's an intentional, aggressive, a phobia of some sort. I think it was just coming from a lack of life experience.
Yep, definitely. She kind of got the ditzy edit. I did watch a Twitch, which is a thing I don't often do, with her and someone talking about how she was given that edit as being like the ditzy person, but there was a lot of things that she said that they cut, like when they asked her something and like she actually answered, but they didn't give her the answer, so it sounded like she didn't know what she was talking about. It was interesting, like, all that we know about reality TV is that it's very heavily edited and you're given a particular narrative was very much confirmed in this Twitch. And
I will say that, makeovers and go-sees are my two favourite episodes of Cycles.
Same.
I adore the go-sees because it's like real world. Oh my God, are they going to make it? Makeovers, everything.
Yes.
Like we all love that. And that's what I
makeover.
wish that Drag Race would even do, like some element of that. Because I think, let's be honest, some of those queens are just not fully realised. But then I suppose, is that makeover what we dislike about shows like this? Because we're trying to conform them. So that's where, like, even like reflecting on the start of this cycle when they had Alpha and Beta J, and I'm like, oh my God, that just sums up this whole show that you're trying to fit these poor individuals and shape them to be not even extensions of themselves, trying to actually belittle them enough to just fit a mould of what at that time is deemed attractive.
By the judges, which are...
Or by the world at that time, yeah.
And even the fact that there were robots and everything was digitised and we're going to put you through this...
and we have to get...
scanning system.
A scan to see your eligibility or their appropriateness for modelling, and they got a percentage. And then what was spit out at the end was like, who actually fits a minority? It's like, okay, great, we've got 14 different minorities here, so we can really broadcast that because they're going to have their own possible capitalizations here that we can really take hold of, how they're slightly different and just like extrapolate that and just really catastrophize it in terms of the editing or how the story could be unveiled or woven together.
And I think that's what they do on reality TV.
100%. Shows
everywhere. Definitely with MAFS, they've got, the couple that they think will actually work out, like they actually maybe match for genuine reasons, and then they've got the drama person and they've always got a narcissistic, toxic person, and, it just goes on and on.
Because Sam, her makeover...
was the best.
Girl.
Yes.
She looked stunning, and her natural shot with Tyra, that is an all-American girl, and that's what I would say. And I don't find that attractive, but she just looked like a Calvin Klein sort of
or for
real
me,
model.
On the top of my Dolly magazine at the time,
Girlfriend.
covering
TV
CoverGirl
hits.
or whatever. Yeah, TV hits. And she was a very sporty person, so she kind of exuded that through her.
Yeah.
Because now apparently she's like a coach or something.
Fits the narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I just feel, while we're on the topic of Sam, welcome to this podcast has now changed to Truth Talking with Clinton. It was the most disappointing, anticlimactic top 2 of my life.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't care.
No.
And even like Sam, I was going for Sam more than McKee because I was just like, McKee,
McKee.
meh.
And again, personality, didn't really have much of a personality for me. I think I couldn't remember anything about her. She mentions her boyfriend every 5 seconds. That's all I can
And she
remember.
works out, and like, you know, my Instagram's as boring as McKee in terms of all my posts are about BFT, mate. But, you know, fuck, that is just not a good storyline.
She's pretty.
Ish.
She also got a
Ish.
very good makeover, I think.
Ish.
Like her,
Again, don't think it was the
not
best.
even that conventionally pretty. Or
Which is what made her probably more of a front runner in Tyra's eyes, because I think she still fit the bill in terms of being tall.
Yes, she was
Probably a size
tall,
0.
lanky, yeah. But yeah, like her bright red hair, which I would rock all the time, was pretty.
Yeah.
So when she gets that cut, like, she does look good, but
Ish.
Top one?
I'm gonna lead with ish. That's how
Ish.
she is in my head.
she just kind of was a sleeper. Like, she did some good shots and she did some good catwalks, but like, never a front runner for me.
Did you not love the fact that they've sent all these models and they've all got to be sex workers all within windows?
Yes.
And then I'm just watching it going, is this any different to being a sex worker? Because
No,
you're selling yourself.
That's literally the same
You
thing.
are.
Yeah.
It is exactly the same.
Yeah. And that's when Eleanor sort of stands up for sex work as well, which is pretty progressive.
Correct.
Because a few of the girls are like, oh, I don't know why you'd be a prostitute. And she's like, I don't know why that's a problem.
And I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Each to
So
their own.
She's pretty progressive for 2008. Yeah, I think that's everyone. But let's just briefly talk about how much do we know? Is this a fairly accurate representation of the modelling world? In your perspective and opinion, do you think it sort of touched on what it's actually like to be a model? It tries to be.
It is pretty reflective of the cutthroat industry in terms of if you're, you know, you've got one tattoo, no deal. Yep, we'll pay you an extra. We'll pay you an extra 10 grand if we can cut your hair. And I've had an ex who that happened.
Wow.
Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
It's going to
Do
go
what
back.
you want with my hair.
Get a wig, girl. So that's where I think elements of it, and I suppose that's why I like the go-sees, because I think that in itself is more realistic.
Yeah, it feels real because it's almost real. Like they're actually
Correct.
modelling agencies.
Well, and go walk for me, take one
Yeah.
candid snapshot.
And then if it's like a couple of minutes there, you're done. Like,
Yeah, and
knowing
like
that,
I
didn't
love
go
that
well.
we're like passing judgment on something that we've never been a part of, though. Like so, and we're like going, I think it's real because, like,
definitely
you know, all in my you know, high end Givenchy, all of those top name tiered fashion brands that I've modelled for in my head.
Well, did you know that I was at Melbourne Fashion Festival on Wednesday in my knickers?
Yes, I did, and you
So
looked
now-
beautiful.
Thank you. So now I do have some lived experience.
Yes. I think, and that's where I would openly say that I was victim of the times in terms of what I regarded as beautiful, but that's where
100% same.
that, yeah, let's be truthful. And that's where, as I've aged and developed and, you know, the mouldings of what you term as attractive now, I'm more attracted to any high confidence and just a good sense of self and just really embracing all of who you are. That is hot.
Yes, thank you. It is.
That is hot. Like, and that's why, like, when I saw the photos of you, I was like, hot bitch, right there.
I wasn't just saying that to get a compliment.
But you're welcome.
Thank you. But yeah, I think, you know, it's very timely we're talking about this show because it's like if it is indeed like this in the modelling world, which it probably is still that cutthroat, it hasn't moved with the times and that, you know, now much more acceptable to embrace a fat body and fat being beautiful, disabled bodies being beautiful,
Correct.
whether you're big, small, fat,
In
skinny,
between.
in between.
Whatever. Because I was really shocked by the two at the start of this cycle when there were two girls that were competing to be the plus size girl of the season. And they actually gave one girl padding because she wasn't big enough.
Yeah, they
and
said
then they
she
bring
was
back...
too small to be a fat plus size model, but not skinny enough.
You're not a fat model.
You're not fat enough.
But then even like they brought back Whitney, who she was the first plus size, and I'm using quotation marks for, you know, all my listeners out there.
She's probably a size 12.
She was a size 12. She is not plus size. I was looking at her and going, when she came back into, you know, what was this, cycle 11, and she reappeared, I was like, you are not plus size. I'm sorry.
I'd have to lose a lot of weight to be her size.
Stunning. I'm not saying she's unattractive, but I'm just like, that's where I think this show had very binary constructs as to fitting a mold or fitting certain labels.
Yeah, and I think for that reason, it's potentially been a very harmful display of the modelling world, perhaps truthful, but did we need it? Because I think, you know, I wasn't a teenager when this came out, but I think if I was and I watched it all the time, I'd feel even more self-conscious about my body than I did then, knowing that I will absolutely never get to this level if I wanted to.
I do agree, because I just think that Top Model was sort of a product of the time, but I do think it didn't really break any of those negative stereotypes.
No.
And alternatively, it sort of did the opposite. It really perpetuated and arguably amplified them in a really negative and destructive way for society, because that's where they would say, oh, to some contestants at the start, oh, you're too skinny, oh, you're a bit chunky, you need to lose weight, or it looks like you
close your gap tooth. Widen your gap tooth.
They closed it, but she only let them close it partially, not wholly. But I do think that Tyra's really missed the opportunity to really change the narratives and make them more positive. Instead, she's just really made mental health and diagnoses being used as fodder.
Yeah.
It's literal fodder where the editing for viewers is more important than really bettering the world. So, again, was this TV show a product of the times? And was this at a turning point of really overly sexed and who could best conform generation? They really aimed for replicas. And that's, you know, a good differentiation against today, where we actually celebrate difference, and it's more attractive to be different than to be the same. So that's where it's almost chalk and cheese. So that's why it was probably good for us to watch this and have that difference of mindset. And we could see that change and iteration of self. It's more rewarding and gratifying that we have developed as humans, that we know, that we are no longer of that very binary, very socially constructed world.
And putting people in boxes.
Correct.
That best fit them.
And not getting the full and arguably true self.
But I guess, I think Tyra set out to change the modelling industry and change the world through this show, or so she says. But at the end of the day, it's an entertainment show. So they needed drama.
Yeah.
They needed to, they believed they needed, I would happily watch an actual genuine show that's just there for people to, say, find love or become a model. But they needed narratives to get viewers and to get popular. And as soon as the drama level dropped down, so did the viewership. So,
correct.
It benefited them to put people in boxes and to hyper-conform and also, make the modelling world even bigger than it was. So, because I know a lot of the challenges got more and more ridiculous as it goes along as well. Even the robot thing in this season was let's make it this theme and make it look really silly, and trying to up the ante each time.
But secretly loved it. I'm sorry, but it really
iconic.
it really kept you on your toes. Who would have thought to get this really sheer piece of lace, attach it to the roof, and then just start making these body shapes.
I mean, that was cool.
Within.
Yeah.
That's a cool mini challenge, and I actually didn't dislike. I think that some of them were absurd, but it really kept it fresh and different. But it probably was a product of its own doing by having to then just try and cube all of this, and it was just not even squaring it. They had to just really amplify it to an unhealthy degree.
Yeah, there's an article that came out through Business Insider, which is a lot of the allegations of bullying that came out from the show in 2020, And there like a couple, I think it was at least two prior contestants like opened up about some of the things they experienced, some of the makeovers that didn't go so well, with weaves actually burning into their hair, losing hair or losing patches of hair, and some of the challenges involving like wanting someone to fall off the catwalk if it was unstable so that they could get that on camera, and things that they would put people through to get some of that drama or, you know, entertainment. So like I understand them needing to up the ante, but it sounds like they took it to an unsafe level.
Correct. And that's why, like, it's come out after, obviously, all the cycles have finished, that the photo chosen wasn't always the best photo of that model or that person. So that's where they were creating that drama in themselves by choosing the worst photo, so then they had something to talk about.
Yeah.
So again, they're fodder, not humans.
Yeah, exactly. And anytime they came up and said, oh, like, that maybe wasn't a great photo of me, they're like, no, you got to own it. Because that's
Correct.
you.
Yes.
You did it wrong.
Like, and they were just like, oh, no, you just got me, like, but the rest of my shoot was brilliant. Like, I did all of this. No.
Nope.
Sorry, you got to own the negative. Done.
Yeah. So, yeah, they really put them out to be martyred at times. Like, I think we've touched on a little bit of this already, but if we were to look at some of the issues that they dealt with, maybe that we haven't touched on, there's themes of race, gender, sexuality, mental illness and disability. What would you like to talk about?
Representation of disability.
Yeah.
Just because I think, you know, I'm a lover of linguistics and language, but that's where, you know, Marjorie herself and Sutan also said it, Jay said it also, spazzing out.
Oh, yeah, that was mentioned quite a few times,
Like,
wasn't it? Not
on
good.
repeat. And then even, I can't remember whose photo shoot it was, but it's like, you look like an amputee.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's...
You look
why is
like
that
your
a
leg's
negative?
been amputated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was just, I don't know, a real negative attached to that.
And Marjorie uses her sort of flexible back that reminds me of my scoliosis back to channel the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and they top, which I hate Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's quite ableist as a story, but she's told to like tone it back. It's too, you're taking it too literal, as in like you look too ugly, I'm assuming. Clearly those terms are seen as ugly, or those types of images. From what I read, that it was generally not accommodating of disability. You mentioned it before. Brittany, one of the models who has short-term memory loss, was given some words to read out, had to read out for an acting challenge, and she said, you know, I actually can't, you know, I need some prompts, and they denied her that. I think eventually she was able to do it, but they sort of didn't believe that she needed the adjustment.
No reasonable adjustments.
No.
That is illegal.
It's, definitely past the Disability Discrimination Act. But having said that, there was a disabled, I think, front runner who was deaf.
Noel DeMarco.
Yes. So that has been, from what it seems, very good representation. I haven't watched that season, but I don't know if he won, but he did win. There you go. So that's a pretty significant milestone for Next Top Model.
He was the second male winner.
Oh, wow. And he was deaf. How amazing is that?
Phenomenal. So fucking hot.
Yeah, well deserved.
And that's, you know, that's my highly academic, judgment on that.
Tick.
Highly fucking hot.
Highly fucking hot. Yeah, I think its treatment of disability has historically been pretty terrible. But also, I think Knowles seems to be someone who's quite proud of his disability and of representing the disabled community, whereas someone who maybe didn't feel quite as much of that might not have had such a positive experience.
100%.
Can we talk a little bit about mental illness as well?
Oh, I think we have to, don't we?
Yes.
Psychocinematic.
That's what this is all about. I feel that...
I'm waiting for you to get the DSM out so we can help diagnose.
No, they're real people. We don't diagnose real people on this podcast.
I
don't want to get sued. Thank you.
I'm joking.
Marjorie clearly has some sort of anxiety disorder or...
What?
Sorry.
What?
Don't sue me, Marjorie.
Seriously? You're almost as bad as Married at First Sight psychologists.
I think I'm a bit
Ouch.
better. Thank you very
Ouch.
much. That is insulting.
Rude.
But yeah, that's not. Wasn't treated very well in terms of her anxiety. A lot of the girls in the group very much kind of gaslight her and don't really try and validate how she's feeling or get frustrated with her. I just don't think it was treated very well. But
Well,
I mean,
she turned into the edit fodder. Like,
Yeah,
she was
exactly.
the alternative main theme after Isis left.
They
and
ran
that's
out of
where
stuff.
they even, like, one of the other contestants said, oh, you're just being overly sensitive.
yeah.
No, she's just being her.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And it was also of its time in that being sensitive was considered a
bad
negative
thing.
thing. Yeah.
Oh, my God, you're actually, communicating your emotions and
Yeah.
feelings.
How dare you?
Oh, you just have to be a product of now, and you don't have to have a personality behind that.
Yeah. But I think clearly...
I'm saying that very sarcastically, everyone. I do not think that. Just have to really put that disclaimer out there. Whoa.
Obviously, with a show like this, producers would be like poking the bear to get a lot of the emotion out of
Poking
someone.
the small
tiny
frail, beautiful bear. Just keep throwing honey at her and then just take it away.
Yeah. So, how much is that her being made to feel that way at the same time? Having said that too, Marjorie went on to create films based somewhat on her experience. I'm not going to watch them. I think they were mostly short indie films. They're probably terrible,
That
but...
looked pretty shit. Steph, how dare you say that look shit? That's so rude. I haven't even watched them.
But yeah, I think that was definitely played up. But generally, Tyra Banks has been accused of exploiting people's trauma on the show and mental
Shock,
illness.
horror.
How could she? And, a lot of them, like one of the things that someone accused her of was like making her mum had just died and making her lie in a coffin, like for a challenge, which is horrible to make someone do that after something like that has happened. But again, it's a reality TV show where...
But that's only like, I can, even from my own memory, think of, there was one contestant who was vision impaired and they had to walk with the lights out.
Yes, that's right. And they couldn't see.
Wrong.
Yeah.
The hell? So this is why when you've mentioned that, I'm sitting here not that shocked because I'm like, they did worse.
Yeah.
Like, Tyra Banks did a disservice to many individuals, and especially on their healing journey, just using that as fodder and just amplifying and catastrophizing it just for better ratings. And that's horrible.
And also, like, when people say, hey, I need an accommodation here, it being said, well, you have to deal with that for yourself because it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, so you can't expect someone to accommodate you. Incorrect. Also on the topic of eating disorders as well, there was a few contestants with eating disorders on the show.
Oh, I think there are more than a few.
It was definitely more than a few, but at least there was, I think, 3 that was very explicit. Elise, Cycle 2.
Don't agree.
Okay, I believe you. I haven't watched Cycle 2.
She's in Cycle 1, by the way. She's an OG. She's actually in Cycle 1 and she came second. That's who I was referring to, that I had PTSD that she did not win.
Right, okay. Cassie, Cycle 3 and Anchal. I didn't see it, but they weren't really addressed or probably dealt with the fact that there was these clear eating disorders going on, whether on or off camera.
But then not even like an eating disorder, but provoking body dysmorphia by the ideals that they're sort of requesting or wanting. So I think that's where there wasn't a lot of overt eating disorders, but I think the narrative and how it was shaped and edited would actually create
100%.
some body dysmorphia and potential eating disorders, just because you had naturally skinny girls. They could eat, jealous, I wish I could still do this because I could when I was younger, eat like 3 Macca's burgers and they were 17. So tiny.
Yeah.
And that's where they get such affirmation that, of course, that's them putting a positive affirmation towards being a size 0.
Yeah.
Like, so then, of course, everyone's thinking, oh, my God, I need to be a size 0 then to get such positive regard by society. Oh, my God, I need to do that.
I'm never going to be skinny enough.
So that's what creates this body dysmorphia. But then the thing that threw me with the Next Top Model was I'd always have these really differentiated opinion on good or bad. There was never in between. So it's almost you're too pretty or you're not ugly enough or you are too fat, you're not skinny enough. So there was never any actual definitive ideal. It was always this vague range that you never knew what you were aiming for.
Yeah.
So then it created this very negative cycle because you're always aiming for something that hasn't been defined.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to have body dysmorphia because you don't even know what you're going toward.
No. And for some person, a gap tooth is a negative, so we have to correct it. And for another person, create a gap tooth.
Correct.
For some person, it's a trait that's given praise, and for another, it's a trait that's been like,
Correct.
no, we need to get rid of it. It's not good. So, like, yeah, what are you supposed to do?
Hello, body dysmorphia.
Yes. And, like, I don't think I can blame this show on any body dysmorphia that I have or had because I was too old, but I definitely would have been affected by it.
Well,
if I was
even,
younger.
and I reflected on myself, and that's what, like, obviously it's quite broadcast in the gay community in terms of, you know, the ultimate gay ideal would be, you know, a complete V in shoulder to waist ratio, that you are highly muscular and beautiful skin and hair that's always done, eyebrows always done, and that's what's regarded as beautiful. And it's only been in the last few years that even, you know, the gay community has embraced and celebrated difference, otters, bears, and that's what
Twinks.
we love putting labels. Well, twinks have always been around, and I would regard myself as now as a twunk.
Okay.
That is the latest new label.
Right. What does that mean?
So a twink that's transformed into a more
Hunk?
handsome hunk. I love that you try to grapple me, Ben. Rude. If I was a girl, that would be
It'd be so
inappropriate.
inappropriate. No, it would be fine.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Like, go for it.
Yeah.
If
so,
there's consent.
but even in that, is it kind of putting people in boxes? Calling people like you're a bear or you're an otter or you're a twink or...
Correct. Like, that's where, why do you have to fit mouldings? Like, and that's why I've never really attached to labels. And that's where I'd even question sexuality or gender. And but like, I still regard myself as gay and I still regard myself as male, but I would still be thinking, I think there's elements of femininity and I embrace that. And I still find some women sexually attractive and I would probably have sex with them, but I'd still identify as gay.
But I think that's a really good point in that life isn't binary. Things aren't binary. The way that things have been binary has been a construct.
Correct.
Life has become that way. That's not the way it was supposed to be.
And that's why I am not getting defensive over Next Top Model, but I just keep going back to really taking 2 steps back and going, is this TV show at the time a product of the generation? It was a part of the many spinning wheels in social conditioning at that time. So I don't think it was it predominantly, because have a look at Simple Life.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at...
Never watched it. Kardashians, yes.
Kardashians is the new age one. You've got Big Brother. You've got all these really, so sadly I've still watched them, but unintellectual sort of shows that have helped inform our view of the world and our ethics and our morals and what we deem appropriate and not appropriate and what actually is our construct of the world and how we're defining it and why we're defining it. So
you've just like perfectly articulated why I want to analyse things like maths and like this show. From what you've just said, I can never say it very well. Like, it shapes the society you're in, and in turn that shapes society and is shaped by society.
Correct. It's a flow-on effect, and it has like a negative reciprocal relationship between it. And sometimes it could be positive.
Yeah.
But that's where I would always regard, say, looking at Next Top Model, I'd never believe in cancel culture, and I'm never a big one of that.
Agree.
Because I just think even within myself, like, we all create within the day that we're in a better version of ourselves. And that would be okay for the show also. But then I think Next Top Model tried to reclaim itself in the later cycles by including men, alternative identifications, minorities, and that's where they tried to reclaim themselves, but I think the damage had been done from the earlier cycles too much, that's why it just didn't flow anymore. And that's where I think, even with reality shows now, I think the ones that are getting the most airtime currently are those that are highly low stakes, they're less contrived, and they're the most real or reflective of now.
Yeah.
So that's where I think we're now going away from these high prizes. We just want the least stakes here, because we don't want to jeopardise someone's identity or being for TV or a show or
Yeah.
to make them into, as we've said many times, fodder.
Well, we're more inclined to critique it at least and to seek out something that's more real rather than manipulated. And it's interesting because during COVID, a lot of people rewatched ANTM for nostalgia reasons because we had nothing else better to do. And that's
100%.
where a lot of people came out and were like, holy fuck, this was really fucked. All this stuff was really harmful and problematic. And it's led to Tyra having to say, like, yeah, we fucked up a few times there.
She only said it once.
She only said it once.
She said minimal about wanting to, and she's a businesswoman. Like, Tyra is a smart girl.
And a lot of people have said terrible things happen, but she's a businesswoman.
Correct. And she's only ever come out and said one negative critique on the show, but it even wasn't that negative. It was more just a very neutral way of looking at it, of just saying we've progressed and we've developed as a society or something along those lines. I don't think it was that articulate.
I think it's something
I'm saying that I am articulate.
Oh, some of those decisions we made were not good decisions.
Yeah,
like
it was something really vague like that.
Let's just mention a little bit more about how they represent ISIS. It's like they take a big gamble, I guess, for the time of presenting the first trans contestant on the show. And they are really trying to champion the trans community and give her that opportunity, same as everybody else. But do you think, Clinton, they kind of did it without really giving themselves more of enough of that understanding and knowledge of the community itself? Because it feels like they just sort of did it without actually understanding a little bit more about ISIS and what she's going through.
Yeah, 100%. Because I just think it was a little bit for that time, a bit of a tick box. And, you can look at the cast and they all fit different minority groups. So we've got Isis, who's, trans and a person of color. So she's, minority on a minority. And, this is such an amazing opportunity for Tyra and the whole team just to really help change that narrative of just a minority that hasn't got enough visibility. And that's where they had that great opportunity. And I think it sort of fell flat because you're right that even Tyra, I think it defines the whole lack of sort of preparedness for them when even Tyra, right at the end, when they turn poor ISIS, you've represented the LGBTQ, have I said that right? Like, and that's not
so cringe.
That is a, verbatim response almost of Tyra. And I think that just really reflects the time and, that lack of full awareness and really delving deep and paying respect to the really important narrative that could have taken place. Like, they touched on little elements like, increased visibility in terms of hormone injections, really helping give her a voice and to try and just, I don't know, increase the breadth of that spectrum of diversity in the world and the acceptance of that difference. But just the way that her coming out, lack of a better word, because she was sort of forced to proclaim that she was, assigned male at birth. So that's where they had that opportunity, but then sort of fell flat a bit.
Because it feels like they're like, oh, we've got ISIS, we'll present ISIS, but we still don't quite understand. Like the fact that Jay Manuel sort of says, oh, she's trying to be a woman, which you mentioned before, but it's just sort of that overall lack of really getting an understanding of the trans experience and also what's appropriate as well. Like it's really, to me, inappropriate to ask, do you have a penis? Like, whose business is that? So she's really put out there to share it all. In some ways, that's probably very an educational experience for lots of people of actually understanding the trans experience. But it was also quite inappropriate. And I know that it's of its time, but I still think maybe some connection or discussion with ISIS or other people of the trans community first would have made it a little bit more protective of her. I just feel like she's just kind of was left out to dry a little bit. There was bullying going on. There was no real that we saw attempts to mitigate any of that. It was just like, here we go. Good luck.
And that's where you could almost tell they were sort of trying to make best, and they actually made best not by telling a narrative really respectfully and informatively, but alternatively just used her, as we've said previously, as fodder. Like, That's where they just
Yep.
really edited that just to really project the hatred towards difference from the other contestants, as opposed to using it as a learning opportunity and realizing she is female.
Exactly.
Gender is a social construct, and she identifies as female. She is female. You don't, I think that's where, of the time, and I do wonder, like, I think I can only speak from my experience of even I had a really naive understanding, and I'm a part of the community. And then at that time, really, that acronym was LGBT. And then from there, we've now got QIA plus. There's a breadth of knowledge and respect and a really changing landscape in terms of that queer community. And that's where really, like, just looking at the speech Jimmy goes to language, but like just really seeing how it's evolved and going in terms of, you know, gender, sexuality, sex, there's differences there, and really having more refined conversations and really helping label these. And xenophobia, we've got, assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, changing that language to, not a transsexual, they're transgender. So that's where of that time, and even the language reflects the low knowledge and disrespect, sort of subliminally. But then as time's gone on, we've been more conscious and more respectful of those boundaries and what is okay and not okay. They aren't a circus. They are human.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's fair that, some of that language probably wasn't, at least it wasn't very well known at the time, of some of the different ways people identify, and also, terms such as pansexual or ace or, things like that. But I do think it would have been good to see particularly some of the girls' comments, like, questioned, or like just, whoever they were talking to. And I know, this would have broken the, talking head sort of way of doing it. But like when one of them said, I wouldn't have hung out with someone like Isis before, like going, oh, why is that? Just like what would be a problem? If anyone sort of just posed the question to some of
Well,
those girls, like, are you being a bit transphobic right now? Then that would have been nice to see on screen. And I don't think that was,
was only
I
one.
think that probably would have been appropriate for the time.
There was one occasion, and this is where I didn't regard McKee as the winner, but it was a winner in my eyes, of just like she was the only one to actually uphold and go, it's not my place to judge.
Yeah.
And that simple sentence, just in regards to, and then that real, wanting to build rapport and connection, understand from McKee, and then a couple of the other closer girls, Marjorie, Elena, those that were a little bit more progressive in thinking, actually wanted to get to know Isis as a person. She wasn't a thing. Like that's where that's where there was that difference and change in tact, and genuinely being a decent human being and appreciating we're not all the same. However, of that time, that was a time of who can conform to trends and stereotypes best. You're the coolest if you can uphold those the best, as opposed to being different. Whereas now, difference is, attractive. Difference is we've completely changed our tune in regards to that, and we want to celebrate and appreciate difference now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do wonder though, I think the juxtaposition of how the girls treat Isis, but then when like someone like James St. James shows up, who is one of the guests in one of the episodes, who's a very, very celebrated queer icon. And, when he walks out and everyone's like, yeah, oh my God, James St. James. It's like, what? Like it's just that he's almost the epitome of non-binary gender expression, but he's celebrated, whereas Isis is someone they fear.
And that's the stuff that, like, it makes you just really take, those 3 steps back and go, whoa, why is there such a contrast in reactions here? And then, you can only assume or infer from there. And then you reflect on those 2 differences, Isis versus James St. James. And James St. James is, flamboyant and quite overt in, upholding there is no masculine or feminine. He is just who he is. And that's where he was highly celebrated. And we have to look that, is James St. James on this spectrum? Was that okay at the time because society had desensitized them enough that he was safe enough. He wasn't too different. He was a bit same
Mm.
but different. And
Yeah.
that's where we could bring in race as well as gender or sexuality here, because that's where he's a white,
True.
non-binary individual, and that's where ISIS is, transgender, person of color. There's many minorities on minorities.
Also class as well, whereas, James at Dreams is high in the fashion industry, and Isis, she was not long ago homeless as
Correct.
well.
She was discovered in a homeless shoot of last season. Like,
Yeah.
this is massive, and that's why I think they had such opportunity. Like, look at that amazing narrative, and no wonder she was a champion, both during
Mm.
and after this show, because she helped sort of change that landscape, change that narrative, and at least get a little bit more visibility. Tyra didn't do it well, but at least I do feel that Isis really held herself respectfully. She held her ground,
Mm.
and she went more forward moving. She didn't get eaten up by that. She still was able to have a little bit of advocacy and really help shift and change, and hopefully be part of the world that we are a part of now. So, we could reflect back
Mm.
and say, was she a key player? Like, she might have been, that starting ground. So Tyra's done well at least to give her the opportunity, and then Isis has taken it and run with it. That's where, I just really looked at that chalk and cheese reaction to James St. James. Side note, James St. James, adore.
I think that's still a common theme with what's going on over the world, really, but particularly some of the United States drag bans and trans bans. It's still, an overtly out gay man is still considered more acceptable than a trans person, and that is still something we're struggling with today.
And that's where, like, do you wonder? Because this is where once we go through these negative cycles and we feel like we're making such progress, and we go back to then clear discrimination of the minority we're
Mm.
thinking we're moving towards more acceptance and celebration of. And then it make me wonder, is that the case because, obviously we're more aware and everyone's got, a friend who identifies as homosexual, lesbian, gay, what have you. But then the minority within that queer spectrum, is that still they're targeting within a political party is because they come from, quite commonly Christian beliefs or any other religions that, any non hetero sort of sexuality is regarded. So that's where, is this their safe space because they still can uphold and still discriminate towards one element of it, but they can't overtly go against a homosexual
But
because, that would be, paying out one of their close friends because, that's in the closer realm of more normality now. So that's where I get really concerned, and my mind just races as to how we get to a point where drag is regarded as highly sexual, like them reading a kid's book or something, and that's where they're doing it for the sake of the children. No, they're not. There has to be some other really
absolutely. I don't think.
coercive mindset behind it. What's of more concern? I would send my kid to a drag show, then a confession booth at a Catholic church.
Exactly, 100%. Who's more likely to actually abuse this kid? Statistically, the Catholic Church. Yeah, so yeah, I agree. I feel like there's a cognitive dissonance perhaps with religion as well, in that, I can't actually go against my religious beliefs, or, if I believe that the Bible, even though it doesn't really say it anywhere,
Yeah.
that homosexuality or being trans is wrong, I can't go against that. So it must be, the drag queens that are wrong, even though statistically it's the church that's wrong. And also, Americans love guns.
Yeah, so if you look at through some of, historical mythology, like any of gender, sexuality was not really even spoken of, but then quite overtly, um, masculine, feminine, assigned male at birth, dressing as female was celebrated and regarded as the highest
Yeah.
pinnacle of being, to help really lead a society. So that's where, looking at religion versus some other forms of history, we've been surrounded by them everywhere. And it's only a matter
Mm.
of once this has been gaining traction and, it's a massive thanks to RuPaul and, Drag Race. But look at, we had Dame Edna, we've had so many other past massive celebrities, and they were in small doses, so they were manageable, they were controlled. But then now that this trend is like enveloping all the generations in a good way because we're celebrating difference and accepting of all, that's where the older generations, especially within political parties, are really losing interest and they're losing control
Mm.
and we're also losing religion. Like, so this is where,
Mm.
that's what makes me just think of, trying to take the step back and understand where it's coming from is that they're grappling of trying to, you know, any of the tentacles, like just try and grapple onto anything to try and keep what is known because it's just beyond their knowledge or their experience or way of being.
Understanding. I think also that people like Dave Edna and other, there would be lots of comedy people dressing in drag and things like that. Is that it's also providing some sort of entertainment that is well liked as well. So that's more acceptable. But if someone's just wanting to live their very mundane life in, you know, changing that gender expectation, then that's considered more unacceptable because it's like, no, we want you to give me something to enjoy. But
Okay,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
doing that, then what are you doing? I don't understand.
So then they're used as sort of entertainment as opposed to being regarded as a human. Like, because that's what, like,
As a human, yeah.
if you reflect on, thinking about the times of Next Top Model and when this cycle aired, Will and Grace was massive at this point. But then that was, and it was a
True.
phenomenal, and it's still a phenomenal series. And I think it was really groundbreaking, but it was still just a comedy, so we can laugh at them, not with them. So then that's where it was such a massive, massive shift when they put in the first gay kiss, like two males kissing, because even we've had that societal sort of more acceptance of two females kissing. And, this is at the time also of like the Britney Madonna kissing. Like if we had two male singers at that time kiss, that a different realm. Society wouldn't have been able to cope. So that's where, at that time of Will and Grace, like this was that, shifting and changing of the guard of just greater visibility and greater, deeper dives into the queer lives and being okay with them. Because this is where, we had also TV shows Queer as Folk, the L Word, and they openly and quite forthrightly put queer culture, no holds bar, unrated, off they went. And that really helped give that visibility and that normality and normalization of this difference. And this is a part of the normal spectrum of human beings.
I feel like we've progressed from that too, in that those shows can come out today and not necessarily be like, this is queer, flash, flash, flash. Because, like, it was still very much in the title. Will and Grace, not so much, but it was very obviously about, best friend, one of them being gay. But, Queer as Folk, the L Word, all very much like, just in case you're not aware, this is about the queer lifestyle. So just so you know. Whereas now we can be a bit more nuanced in the portrayal. There can be stories where there's lots of different sexualities in the one sort of storyline. So I think we've progressed a bit in terms of that.
100%. It's almost like they've put like a safety banner on it by like, being so overt. And this is going to be a gay show for gay people. Or if you're not gay, be prepared. I think that was also, that's why I just do think this was like a pinnacle time just for LGBTQI plus for the whole community, because it was just when we started to get real visibility of all and greater acceptance within society. Obviously, we've progressed that to gay marriage and, there's a whole onslaught of things there. But then most importantly, and sort of what I identify with is, person first. It's as opposed to being identity first. Like that's all well and good. And it's how you want to see yourself in the world. So if you want to lead yourself as I'm a gay male, go for it. If I'm a trans male or trans female, if I'm non-binary, lead with that if that's your label and that's what you want to lead your identity with. Go for it. I'm a big supporter of it. I personally would go person first, and that's why I identify as Clinton, who happens to be gay and who happens to have a disability. I'm not, disabled Clinton or gay Clinton. Like, that doesn't label me. That doesn't sum me up as a person. So
Mm.
I'm me, and I've got these elements that are secondary, and it just makes up the being and the human that I am.
Yeah. And I think that's completely, up to the person to decide how they want to identify. And even that identification is a choice too. We don't have to identify as anything. The fact that society forces us to be, are you gay? Are you straight? Are you non binary? Are you woman or male? That in itself is society's expectations to label yourself.
100%. Well, like we've lived in this heteronormative sort of life that we want to fit a binary mold. So you are A or B, you are male or you're female. So then that's where that is just such of low intelligence and knowledge now, because we do know that there is a difference between gender, sexuality, and sex. And that's where gender is a social construct. So that's where if that person identifies as female, she's not trying to be female. She
She
is
is
female.
female.
So that's why it goes back to ISIS of just like, looking back on, how she was regarded within that cycle and just that low knowledge base of where this insight and intelligence of. And that's why it probably hurts more is because, Jay Manuel, openly homosexual male, and he's the one saying, oh, she's trying to be female. So, but then I say that, but then even at that time, I could reflect and, even in high school, we would say things that we're not proud of whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
how often was gay used in a negative connotation, which I would never, ever, ever do anymore. And I think the
Same.
power of language, we need to be really respectful of, because we don't know who is going to interpret that and the impact that that has on them. And we should all, hopefully, want only the best for everyone, have a positive impact, not a negative impact. So that's why, obviously professional background loves language, but I think it just holds such power that we need to be really respectful and be really wise with our words chosen, because that is forming someone's interpretation of the world and what is acceptable and okay. And breaking news, we're all acceptable.
Yes. And I think with just ending that very important point with if we fuck up too and make a mistake, especially if we've got friends who are transitioning or have transitioned, it's okay because it takes you a little bit of time to catch up with your brain, say, for example, using pronouns, etc.
Oh,
But we just have to keep that in mind and just be conscious of that language. And I think for me, what America's Next Top Model represented was what was considered beautiful. And even that has changed so much. And even from my brief dalliance at the Melbourne Fashion Festival, where I showed off my body in all its completely not skinny glory,
and looked
we
gorgeous.
still got a ways. Thank you. I know. We still have a ways to go to promote, fat positivity and fat bodies also being fashionable and beautiful, and disabled bodies, and any body that doesn't fit society's norm. But I think it sets up a really good future for my kids, our kids, to by the time that they're going through their adolescence, there's so much more variety in what can be seen as beautiful for them. Maybe in some ways that's still not celebrated, but there's much more celebration of it now. So that makes me feel hope.
I guess just to finish off with, is there anything else harmful do you think has been perpetuated from the show? And then has there been anything helpful perpetuated?
I think I would start with strengths and positive, that I think at least it normalised some difference.
Yeah.
And at least it started the conversation, and it's really helped create more positive iterations in reality shows like RuPaul, which even RuPaul's had to go through iterations of including transgender contestants. Mm-hmm. So that's where at least it's helped forward move that narrative to be more inclusive and adoring of diverse populations.
And just having Isis in that season, I think, made a huge impact. And according to what I've read, it did open up the world a lot more, and she did bring a perspective that was probably missing from a lot of shows at the time. So that is positive. Anything else harmful?
Oh, I think we've touched on many of them in terms of clear binary constructs, having to be same, but only a little bit different. Don't be too different. Really fit with others' opinions of appropriateness or what's deemed normal, body image, mental health, of how we should be engaging in the world and what is okay and not okay, behaviour-wise or thought-wise or feeling-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that editing and how it was scoped sort of helped cement some really harmful, potentially harmful, negative connotations and sort of cycles of thinking.
And I think just on that note, in the Business Insider article that came out in 2022, there's a whole list of terrible ways that the girls were treated on the show. They took the bathroom doors off so that they really couldn't be alone. They had worked for like ridiculous hours, got very little sleep. Sometimes they didn't eat. Mental health generally was pretty poor by being on the show.
Like, haven't we all not had a good night's sleep and we turn psychotic?
Yes.
Like, I don't think I should use the term psychotic, but you turn into a very different version of yourself, a very negative, bad version of yourself.
Exactly.
So if you don't feed someone, let them sleep, or go to the toilet by themselves,
you get drama.
Of course, I am going to be fodder for your TV, mate. I am going to be amplified to the max.
And there were some very young, very vulnerable girls who were there to be models.
Taken advantage
got
of.
Completely exploited and taken advantage of.
So them in those windows, very reflective of how those contestants were in their mind. These are all prostitutes of society.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we're all sex workers of society.
Which is a valid thing to be.
100%. If I could make, some money off that, watch out OnlyFans.
Yeah, 100%.
Also don't air that.
Well, I guess to finish up, if this show came out today, would it succeed? Would you watch it? Could it be done?
I think it would be almost reminiscent of Big Brother trying to come back, where I think the nostalgia would have viewers for the first 1 or 2 episodes, but we've progressed past this. Even I personally would not want to sort of support or encourage even provoking reminiscing on those past cycles and these real negative cementings of poor framing of human beings.
Yeah, and I think now that we're very much more aware of what actually goes on these shows.
Correct.
And like even with Married at First Sight, a lot of the contestants have gone, fuck it, I'm going online even though I've been told not to share all this stuff. I feel like reality's TV in general is on the decline. Like I think we've seen the wizard behind the curtain too much and we're like, nah, it's a bit gross.
Yeah.
So, I hope that's the way things are going anyway.
Well, most definitely. I think we run on a highly moral or ethical society, or a more ethical and moral society. I think we all still have drips and drabs of people. Donald Trump. But then...
And there's still, today there's been ban on trans people in
and that's
America.
that's what's come back with America. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that there's all these real negative cycles that we're going through still, and it only takes a minority with a big enough voice that these old ways of thinking or being and not fully being inclusive or really adoring those diverse communities or people or minorities, that's where we are just falling back into this highly negative connotation and inhumane treatment of others.
It's almost as things change, we kind of regress a little bit in retaliation before we can move on again. Hopefully that's the next step, we'll be moving on again.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me, Clinton.
Pleasure, treasure.
Would you like to share your social media for anyone who'd like to follow you?
Do I really have to?
You don't have to. That's your
On
Instagram.
My Instagram is @boyblinkquick.
Excellent.
But that is...
It's
not that
BFD.
exciting. It's mostly just Clinton being lazy and anyone else that's filmed me.
Being lazy, getting up at the crack of dawn to go to the gym is not lazy.
Well, it's more just I can't be bothered. I'm never a selfie person. It's really awkward for me.
You should become one.
I don't want to be. I don't like influencers. But I could be one. But I won't be.
Just try it.
But I could. But I won't.
Follow Clinton and find out if he does.
Again, @boyblinkquick. Because I am now on this new reclaiming of self of being an influencer in my dreams.
Make it a reality today.
Yeah, correct. Get 3 more followers. Winning.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Steph.
and
I
things
think
like that.
I think you need to edit that out, Steph, because that's not very interesting.
I'm sorry.